Meh, meh, meh.
What did your grandfather know about pulling bucks to his property that nobody bothered to teach you before he was gone? Because somewhere between the invention of the trail camera and the $400 food plot seed bag, an entire generation of deer knowledge disappeared from hunting camps across this country. Your grandfather did not have cell cameras, scent elimination suits, or satellite maps. He had salt, a pocket knife, a .030, and 40 years of watching the same ground from the same kitchen window. He did not subscribe to a hunting channel. He did not read forums. He walked the fence line every morning, watched the field from the porch every evening. And by the time November rolled around, he knew where every deer on the property was going to be because he had been watching them since April without ever once walking into the timber to check on them. And he killed deer every single year on a property that his neighbors, with all their modern equipment, cannot figure out today. I spent the better part of 3 years tracking down these techniques from old-timers in the Appalachian Mountains of West Virginia, the Ridge and Valley country of Northeast Tennessee, and the River Bluff farms of West Central Illinois. Some of what they taught me is legal everywhere. Some sits in a gray zone depending on your state. A few techniques are flat out illegal in certain states under modern baiting and attractant definitions. I will flag every one. Check your regulations before you try anything. But legal or not, every single technique on this list works, and your grandfather knew it. If your grandfather taught you something about deer that I do not cover, leave it below. I want to build the biggest collection of this knowledge before the last generation that used it is gone. Stay until the end because number 36 is the one thing every old-timer I talked to said matters more than any trick on this list. And not one of them could explain why modern hunters refuse to do it. Number 1. Salt licks placed at the intersection of 2 travel corridors. Your grandfather did not throw a salt block in a random clearing. He put it where 2 deer trails crossed, which concentrated traffic from multiple directions into one spot. The salt drew deer, the intersection held them, and the stand overlooked both trails plus the lick. Check your state baiting laws. Hunting over salt is illegal in roughly 20 states. Number 2. Corn piles in thick cover 60 to 80 yards from the field edge, roughly the distance from home plate to the outfield wall. Not in the open where every deer feeds at 2 a.m. Your grandfather put corn where a buck would feel safe eating in daylight because the overhead canopy removed the exposure anxiety. Illegal in most states for hunting purposes, legal for wildlife observation in many. Know the line in your state. The placement mattered more than the corn itself. Your grandfather did not just dump a pile and sit over it. He watched deer trails for a month, found where bucks entered thick cover from the field, and placed the corn 10 to 15 yards inside that entry point, roughly the distance across a large living room. The buck ate in the security of cover. The stand sat 20 yards from the corn. The shot was close. The light was low and the deer felt safe. Most guys who bait today throw corn in an open field and wonder why they only get nighttime photos. Number 3. Apple trees planted along timber edges 10 to 20 years before they were needed. Your grandfather planted 3 apple trees the year he bought the property. He did not hunt over them for a decade. By the time his son was old enough to carry a rifle, those trees were dropping 200 pounds of fruit per season, and every deer on the property knew exactly where they were. Nobody plants apple trees anymore because nobody hunts the same ground for 30 years. That patience is the technique. An old-timer in Sullivan County, Tennessee, told me his grandfather planted 5 crabapple trees in 1949. 3 of them are still producing. The deer on that property walk past 2 of those trees every single evening in October, on their way from bedding to the lower fields. The family has killed deer from the same stand near the middle crabapple tree for 3 generations. The tree is 75 years old. The deer pattern it created is older than everyone reading this. Number 4. Damming small seasonal creeks with rocks and logs to create shallow pools, roughly 6 to 8 inches deep, about ankle height, in areas where no natural standing water existed. In dry October conditions, a reliable water source on a property without a pond pulls deer from neighboring ground. An old-timer in Braxton County, West Virginia. That steep hardwood hollow country along the Elk River where the ridges run like stacked knife blades, showed me 3 rock dams his father built in the 1960s that still hold water. Deer have been using those pools for 60 years. Number 5. Mixing trace minerals into the soil around natural licks by crumbling livestock mineral blocks, the $8 kind from the feed store, into the dirt at existing scrape locations. The minerals leach into the soil and create a year-round draw that does not look like bait because it is part of the ground, illegal if classified as mineral attractant in your state. Legal in states that exempt mineral supplements placed more than 30 days before season. Check your regs. Number 6. Laying scent trails from bedding areas to stand locations using tarsal glands, which are the dark, oily patches on the inside of a buck's hind legs, saved from a harvested deer and frozen for use the following season. Your grandfather dragged a tarsal gland on a string behind him on the walk to his stand. Any buck that crossed that trail followed it straight to within shooting range. The gland costs nothing. You already have it on every buck you kill. Number 7. Timing the rut by watching doe behavior, not buck behavior. Your grandfather knew the rut was about to break when does started moving erratically and showing up in unusual places. A doe standing alone in the middle of a field at 10 a.m. in late October is a doe being pushed by a buck you cannot see yet. She is the indicator. He is the target. Number 8. Hunting the 3 days surrounding the full moon closest to the autumn equinox, which old-timers called the hunter's moon. Whether the moon phase actually affects deer movement is debated, but the old-timers I talked to hunted it religiously, and their notebooks showed clusters of buck sightings around those dates. I cannot prove the moon did it. I can tell you they believed it, and their results were consistent enough that I started paying attention. Number 9. Reading wind by watching spiderwebs. A spiderweb covered in morning dew shows wind direction at ground level, which is where deer smell you, not at tree stand height where the wind might blow differently. Your grandfather checked spiderwebs on the walk in. A thread swinging toward your stand meant you were about to get busted. He would turn around and hunt a different stand. Most of us would sit anyway and hope for the best. Number 10. Identifying bedding areas by finding clusters of oval depressions in leaves or grass, roughly 3 feet long and 2 feet wide, about the size of a bathtub, with deer hair pressed into the soil. Your grandfather did not just find beds. He counted them. A bedding area with 6 to 8 beds is a doe group. A single bed isolated 50 to 100 yards from the group, roughly half a football field, is a mature buck. The stand goes between the lone bed and the doe group, because that is the route he walks every time he checks on them. Quick pause here. Everything I just walked through, and 100 more tricks like it, is sitting inside the Buck Hunter's Bible, 2026 edition. 280 pages of the stuff that actually puts deer on the ground. And right now, if you grab it, I am throwing in the 30-day opening day roadmap completely free. That is a 60-page day-by-day pre-season plan that walks you from the first scout to opening morning, so you start this season ahead of every other hunter in the woods. Link in the description, QR code on screen. This is the season you stop guessing. Number 11. Dropping trees across secondary escape routes to funnel deer toward your stand during drives. A tree felled across a narrow trail forces deer to divert to the next available path. Your grandfather felled 2 or 3 trees in September, and the deer adjusted their escape routes by October. Legal on private land, effective on drives. Completely forgotten. Number 12. Collecting doe urine from harvested does by pressing on the bladder during field dressing and storing it in a glass jar in the freezer. Your grandfather had a jar of doe urine that cost him nothing and contained actual local deer scent from the same property. The commercial bottle you buy at the shop contains urine from pen deer in another state. His was better, free and local. I started doing this 6 years ago, and the difference in response was noticeable on my cameras. Bucks investigated the local doe urine more aggressively than the commercial product in a side-by-side test on mock scrapes. My guess is that local urine contains pheromone signatures the resident bucks recognize as belonging to a doe they have encountered, while the commercial urine comes from an unknown animal in a different state. The buck's response to a familiar doe versus a stranger is different. One triggers curiosity, the other triggers competition. Number 13. Calling only during the first and last 30 minutes of legal light using a homemade grunt tube, which is a piece of garden hose with a reed from a party horn jammed in one end. Your grandfather grunted softly, once, maybe twice, then he stopped. He did not blind call every 15 minutes for 6 hours like the videos tell you to do. Number 14. Hanging stands on the downwind side of the thickest, ugliest cover on the property because that is where the oldest buck beds, not on the pretty ridge overlooking the food plot. Your grandfather did not hunt with a view. He hunted in the dark, nasty stuff where the deer lived. Number 15. Washing hunting clothes in baking soda and drying them on a clothesline outdoors instead of in a dryer with scented sheets. 0 synthetic fragrances. Zero cost beyond a $2 box of baking soda that lasts all season. Number 16. Community deer drives with 6 to 10 walkers pushing timber toward standers positioned at known escape points. Conducted at walking pace with no yelling. The walkers moved slowly enough that deer walked out ahead of them instead of running in panic. A panicked deer runs anywhere. A calm deer follows the path it always uses. That predictable path is where the stander waited. Number 17. Planting clover and logging roads and skid trails in spring so deer had a food source along existing travel corridors by fall. A 50-foot strip of clover in a logging road costs about $8 in seed and turns a barren path into a feeding lane that funnels deer past your stand all season. Number 18. Predicting acorn crop failures by checking oak trees in July. If the acorns are small and sparse on a white oak in July, the crop will be poor in October, and deer will concentrate on the trees that did produce. Your grandfather checked his oaks 3 months before season and knew which ridge to hunt before anyone else figured it out. Number 19. Reading rubbed lines to determine buck travel direction. Bucks rub the side of the tree facing the direction they are traveling. A line of rubs with stripped bark all facing the same direction tells you exactly which way that buck moves through the corridor and at what time of day based on whether the rubs are near bedding, facing away from it, which means morning, or near food, facing toward it, which means evening. Number 20. Measuring track depth in firm soil to estimate body weight. A deep track with visible dewclaw impressions, the 2 small marks behind the main hoof. On firm ground means a heavy deer. Your grandfather measured tracks against his thumb. A track wider than his thumb was a shooter. Number 21. Positioning cameras, or in your grandfather's case, positioning his own observation. At scrape lines 50 to 80 yards downwind of the scrape rather than directly over it, because mature bucks scent check scrapes from downwind before. Approaching. The camera or the stand belongs where the buck actually walks, not where he paws the dirt. Number 22. Setting decoys in the shadow line of the timber edge rather than in direct sunlight, because a plastic deer standing in full sun at 10 a.m. casts hard shadows that look wrong to an approaching buck. A decoy in the dappled shade of the timber edge looks like a deer standing in cover, which is where deer actually stand. Number 23. Building ground blinds from natural materials, stacked logs, brush piles, and downed limbs 3 to 4 weeks before season so the structure becomes part of the landscape before deer pressure begins. A pop-up blind setup opening morning is a new object. A brush blind built in September is furniture by November. Number 24. Entering and exiting the woods in complete silence by memorizing every step of the entry route, including which branches to duck, which leaves to avoid, and which creek rocks are stable enough to step on without splashing. Your grandfather walked his entry route in the dark without a headlamp because he had done it 500 times. Look, I am going to be straight with you. Everything I am walking through in this video is just a small piece of what is inside the Buck Hunter's Bible, 2026 edition, 280 pages, 101 field-tested tricks, and right now you also get the 30-day opening day roadmap free with it. A 60-page day-by-day plan that gets you ready before the season even starts. I do not know how long that bonus stays in the deal. But if you have been watching these videos and thinking this could be my season, that is the move. Link in the description below, QR code on screen. Make this the year. Number 25. Sitting a stand for 4 hours minimum. Not 2 hours. Not until you get bored, 4 hours. Your grandfather brought a sandwich, a thermos, and his patience. He did not check his phone because he did not have one. He watched the woods. The mature buck that walked out at 9:45 a.m. walked out because nobody moved for 3 hours. Modern hunters leave at 9. The deer know it. An old-timer in Braxton County told me he has killed 4 mature bucks between 9:30 and 10:15 a.m. over the past decade. All 4 walked the same trail. All 4 came from the same direction. He said they were waiting for the morning hunters to leave, and then moving through the corridor once the pressure lifted. He just sat there longer than everyone else. Number 26. Following seasonal deer concentration shifts from summer feeding areas to fall staging areas to winter thermal cover, using the same walking routes that they traveled between the tractor and the barn. Your grandfather mapped deer movement with his feet and his eyes over decades. Number 27. Glassing bachelor groups in August bean fields, from the truck at dusk to inventory the bucks before the groups break up in September. Your grandfather sat in his truck with binoculars and a cup of coffee and watched. No cameras, no trespass, no pressure. By September 1, he knew every buck on the property. Number 28. Noting the exact date velvet was shed on individual bucks because that date correlates with testosterone rise, which predicts when that specific buck will begin making rubs, scrapes, and responding to calls roughly 6 to 8 weeks later. Number 29, providing year-round nutrition through fruit trees, clover lanes, and undisturbed browse rather than dumping a bag of corn in October and expecting results. Your grandfather did not feed deer, he grew food for deer. The distinction is the difference between a vending machine and a farm. One runs out, the other does not. Number 30, using predator urine, coyote or fox, placed at property boundaries to create a scent fence that discourages deer from exiting the property toward neighboring ground. Old-timers in Sullivan County, Tennessee, that ridge and valley foothill country south of Kingsport, where the farms sit in hollows between forested ridges, told me their fathers poured fox urine along the property line every October. The deer stayed inside the boundary because the predator scent made the edges feel dangerous. I have no camera data on this one. It was told to me by 3 separate men in the same county. Make of it what you will. Number 31, identifying territorial scrapes. The ones bucks return to year after year in the same location. By looking for scrapes on bare ground where the soil is packed and polished from repeated pawing over multiple seasons. A fresh scrape on leaf litter is new. A scrape on bare, hard-packed earth has been used for years and the buck that works it, or his son, will be back. Number 32. Avoiding hunting pressure by never hunting the same stand more than twice in a week, and never hunting a stand with the wrong wind regardless of how good the conditions look otherwise. Your grandfather would drive to the property, check the wind, and drive home if it was wrong. He did not compromise. That discipline is why the deer on his property never patterned him. Number 33. Hunting the first calm morning after 2 or more consecutive windy days because deer that have been bedded and barely moving for 48 hours are hungry and ready to feed at first light. Your grandfather checked the weather forecast. Actually, he just looked at the sky, and when the wind died after 2 rough days, he was in the stand before dawn. Number 34. Accepting that certain bucks are nocturnal and cannot be killed during legal hours under normal conditions. Then waiting for the one event that changes the pattern, which is the rut. A buck that has not shown a single daylight photo since September will make a mistake during the first week of November when a hot doe pulls him out of bed at 10 a.m. Your grandfather did not chase nocturnal bucks. He waited for November and let biology do the work. Number 35. Understanding that the oldest doe on the property controls the feeding route, the bedding rotation, and the daily travel pattern of every doe and fawn in the group. Your grandfather did not just hunt bucks. He knew the lead doe because she determined where every deer on the property would be at any given time. The stand went on her trail. The buck followed her. Number 36, and this is the one every old-timer said without being asked. They hunted the same ground their entire lives. The man in Schuyler County, Illinois, that bluff country above the Illinois River, where the hardwood timber drops into bottomland cornfields, and the deer move between them on the same draws every November, hunted the same 80 acres his grandfather cleared. He knew where every deer crossed, where every buck bedded, where every doe fed. Because he had watched it for 40 years from the same kitchen window, the same tractor seat, and the same tree stand his father hung in 1978. That multi-generational property knowledge, the accumulated observation of 3 lifetimes on one piece of ground, is the one advantage that no amount of money, technology, or effort can replace. You cannot buy 40 years of watching. You cannot download it. You can only earn it by staying on the same ground long enough for the land to teach you what it knows. My grandfather's stand tree is still standing on the back of the family property. I checked it last November. The bark is grown over where the steps used to be. The shooting lane has closed in with saplings. But the deer trail 20 yards in front of it is still there. Same trail, same deer, different century. If you are lucky enough to hunt the same ground your grandfather hunted, you are holding the most valuable thing in deer hunting, and it did not cost a dime. If you are starting fresh on new ground, start watching. The land will teach you everything your grandfather would have, if you give it enough time.